Hi everyone, thank you for joining us on episode 8 of the Shift PanelCast, Light at the End of Uncertainty. As always, please pay this forward, tell your colleagues to join us and get in touch with questions and queries that you want answered in the events marketing world. Our purpose behind the PanelCast is to shift mindsets for a positive change, specifically within the sports, entertainment and events industry. We want to bring you as many voices as possible from the greater marketing landscape. And as most of us are starting to work towards live events at the end of the year, we've all started to look at each other, the government and large organisations for direction and what is right and what is wrong. From marketing, communications, tickets going on sale, council approvals, sponsors, and the list goes on. One thing we are noticing is the gusto of commercial and producer-owned events in comparison with charity fundraising events. There are approaches to ends of the spectrum, and it got us thinking about the differences and the different business models within the event marketing industry. One thing everyone does have in common, though, is uncertainty. And as we discussed with our panelists tonight, what better industry to deal with uncertainty but the events industry? On a side note, as a business, we had a huge win this week, and we've been awarded a relatively decent grant from Austrade and Shoalhaven City Council to execute an event down in the South Coast to boost the economy after the bushfires. So as a business, we're feeling that things are really looking up for the events world. And this is something that we've been working on since prior to lockdown, that we had to be agile with. It was postponed, but it's so nice that the government have actually been moving forward with all of these grants and still able to provide us with some certainty that this will go ahead at some stage later on in the year or at the beginning of next year. So this week we've got a very special guest from the New South Wales Department of Premier and Cabinet. So we thought we'd reduce the panel to resident panelist CT and also introducing Alastair Lyall. Hi, Alastair.
Hi, Hayley. Hi, Chris.
Hey, mate.
Hello. So Alistair is the Manager of Events in New South Wales Department of Premier and Cabinet. All right. So here we go. Light at the end of uncertainty. So I'm going to just start off by a bit of an icebreaker for both of you. Can you tell us about your favourite event of all time that you've attended? Alistair, I'm going to go with you first.
Okay, well, I got a sports administration degree in university, so I started working on sports events, and I think probably doing my first successful soccer tournament, volleyball tournament in Canberra, and the rush of organising an event at the age of 18 or 19 for the ACT, soccer federations and volleyball associations was just, you'll never get that first rush back again. But again, doing all those first-time events throughout my career, when I moved into community events, to charity events, that was always massive. But from an attendee perspective, it's probably some musical events, like a Glastonbury in the 90s I attended.
You go to Glastonbury?
Seeing Guns N' Roses. In Omaha, Nebraska, seeing Guns N' Roses in the mid-90s. And then probably from a sporting perspective, seeing the South Sydney Rabbitohs win the grand final in 2014 at Telstra Stadium was nice. Really good too.
I like that you didn't just go with one. There is just
yeah, that's right. You can't do that.
Well, I'm gonna say, and I've said a few over the earlier episodes, some of my personal favourites, but this time I'm going to talk about one of my first ever events. And it was right at the start of my career, and it was 1998, and it was the Bathurst 1000. And I was a wide-eyed, enthusiastic, wet behind the ears kid coming into the industry, and I walked into something that I've often described as Mad Max. It's probably the only way that I could describe it from then. And there's, needless to say, I guess I can't you mention a lot of the stories and the things that were sort of happening up and around that, but it was quite the welcome to the industry. And I guess, I was hooked, and here I still am.
Was that in the days when they used to let the crowd bring in like slabs of beer every day?
Yeah, this was prior to that. I was actually there in the years following that with Jeff Jones, where a lot of that was cleared up and
wow.
and brought back, and so I was a big part of that with Jeff. But yeah, I came into it, and at that stage, people went there for their 3 to 4 weeks of holiday annual leave and camp there beforehand as well as the week. And so we were setting up and getting the track ready for weeks beforehand, and people were already camping up there. That was their annual pilgrimage, and it was mind blowing to see the passion.
I think both of your favourite events have gone back to your early days of being in the industry. Alistair, you've worked in the industry for quite a long time. Is it 27, 28 years?
It's about 30 years now, yeah.
And you've had quite a large career in events, and you started off in the US, is that right?
Well, I kind of started off in Canberra out of uni, doing some stuff here, and then I went to the States when I was about 21, and because of a family connection, I'm able to work over there. So I got a job running 3-on-3 soccer tournaments in the western region of the United States. So there I think I was 21, 22 years old, and I was the regional coordinator of events for 3-on-3 soccer tournaments, which I don't think that could happen in any other country. What they really say about America is America is land of opportunity. Really is true, was true, maybe particularly back then. America's certainly going through some challenging times right now. But in the 90s, it was really at its peak, I think. And if you had entrepreneurial thinking, if you had energy and you could talk the talk, they loved that kind of thing over there. And having gotten some good experience in Canberra, I went over there and was organising soccer tournaments in Kansas City and St. Louis and Los Angeles and Phoenix on this model where we'd go into a radio station and we'd sell the rights to the soccer tournament in that market to the radio station, and the radio station would turn around and sell those sponsorship rights to a Kellogg's or a Kruger's supermarket or something like that. Then they'd help promote the event, and then you'd go to a local soccer club and help get grassroots sporting teams involved. Soccer kids, soccer mums and dads are huge over there. And then after that, I did my first community event stuff up in the mountains of Colorado.
Right, and is that what led you to sort of your next step? And I've only just found out about this event. So Crocs Fest. The Crocs Fest.
Crocs Festivals, yeah, Crocs Fest, which was in...
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's like the regional remote version of the Rockestead Challenge. And the Rockestead Challenge is probably familiar to most people, but it's where schools, high schools, put together large-scale musical performances that then get performed in massive arenas in capital cities and big towns around Australia. And the organisers of that saw the remote communities missing out on that, and so they decided to take the mountain to Muhammad, and they set up these events in Kununurra and Tom Price and Thursday Island, South Australia, Moree, for example. So we'd go into these towns and work with a lot of stakeholders, state stakeholders, federal stakeholders, and we'd do a AFL clinic with West Coast Eagles players. We do a tennis clinic with Yvonne Goolagong-Corley. We organise a goal-setting workshop with the actor Aaron Pedersen, so that these kids who were mostly Aboriginal could come in and see this amazing thing for 2 or 3 days, and they'd have to travel hundreds, if not like 1,000 kilometres to get to these events from their extremely remote locations.
I saw it at one point they had 20,000 kids travelling to this event.
Yeah, throughout a whole year.
Yeah.
And nighttime they've been put on their performance as well, like you said, the Rocket Challenge. So it was a really high energy event, very hard work to sit in an office in Sydney and try to get workshops happening in a remote site in Kununurra, for example. But it was a really, really great event.
Interesting locations for logistics, mate.
Yeah, so we had to have a bit of a travelling road show. Like there was a whole, a guy called Paul Enright was in charge of production, and he was in charge of loading the trucks up and making sure that all the stuff we needed to make certain parts didn't have to travel these vast distances to get there, and sometimes under really challenging conditions.
I've done a few tours around Australia, and it is quite the logistical mission.
There's a lot of space in between towns, especially in places like Western Australia, of course.
Do you think events like that, so you mentioned you went to a community event in Colorado and then to Croc Fest. Do you think those experiences within the community sort of directed or guided your career path?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I guess everyone who's doing events has different directions they can go. They can do conferences, they can work for brands and do, product unveilings. They can do sport, they can do purely music. And I guess I've specialised a lot in the later part of my career in community events. And even right now with the department, the state department, I got my grounding in all that working at local government level. And that started in America. So we do like a haunted house at Halloween. And the community would be the ones in the haunted house. So the record store owner would dress up as Frankenstein and his girlfriend would be Frankenstein's bride. And like
very American.
Yeah, the liquor store owner was Dracula. And, so they all put their hands up. It's just so fun to do that. It's all free and all sorts of events. So when you walk into a community like that and you give them energy and you say, hey, we want to organise this awesome thing, can you help us? And they all put their hands up and say, yes, we want to do it. It's just such a rush to make that happen. And especially, if it's successful and a lot of the community come out and participate.
It is fascinating. I love community. I love being part of my own community. I love being part of the events community. And it does, you're right, makes such a difference when you're putting on an event and you've got the back of the community. Probably before we go any further, we should explain to our viewers and listeners your role within the department.
Yeah, so I'm an associate director at the department within the transformation group, the change and engagement branch. But I'm kind of in charge of the event management team. So we do event delivery and we organise events on behalf of the Premier of New South Wales. And that means that me and the team, there's 5 people in it. We often hire contractors for big events like Australia Day to come in and expand the team. We do celebrations for the state, we do commemorations, and we also do ceremonial events as well. So, a good example of 3 of those is we do state funerals, state memorials, but we'll also do Remembrance Day. We get involved in Anzac Day and helping the Dawn Service Trust and the RSL deliver aspects of Anzac Day. But we also run Australia Day in Sydney, which is kind of interesting and a bit of an anomaly because all the other local government areas in the state their Australia Day celebrations are run by their local council. But for historical reasons, we run Australia Day in Sydney. And like, for example, the City of Sydney, who's the local government authority here, they run New Year's Eve, which of course is one of the biggest and best events in the whole world that kicks off the whole year for everyone around the globe.
We've had the pleasure of working with the DPC on a few occasions, but some of our community or some of our viewers may not have had the chance to work with your department before. Maybe you can just tell us a little bit about the role that the DPC plays.
Yeah, sure. So we're an umbrella department, a central agency. We help kind of broker outcomes. We also deliver some things. We work a lot on policy, a lot of stuff, mostly outside the events field. So within the events field, there's my team, which I've just described. There's also event strategy and coordination, and they work with major event organisers to work on big events in Sydney and New South Wales to make sure that all the agencies and stakeholders are working together. So the police, the ambulance, the trains, the buses, the first aid, the event organiser, all the different people that can work on an event, they get together beforehand, they have meetings, they discuss issues, they solve issues, then they convene the GCC, which is the Government Coordination Centre and sits inside the Surrey Hills Police Station and sits next to the POC, Police Operations Centre. And on the day of an event like Mardi Gras or a running festival or New Year's Eve, it is the nerve centre of the not only the event itself sometimes, but the agency's response to that particular event. So if there's an incident that happens, everyone can get on the same page very quickly in a coordinated way. We also have an arm of the team that encourages accessibility at events. And that's been a real massive growth area in the last couple of years. Thankfully, a lot of local communities in New South Wales, event organisers are taking that on board and making their events more accessible. And we also have a corporate relations team that goes out there to garner support and revenue to make our major event, Australia Day, each year happen.
Fantastic.
And so you said before you deliver events on behalf of the Premier. What does that mean? Does that mean that the Premier decides on what events are going to happen and then you execute them, or is it come from another government directive but it's through the Premier's office?
Well, yes, it's a little bit of both. Sometimes the Premier will say, for example, when Jack Mundy passed away, she decided that he should receive a state funeral, which is given to members of the New South Wales community who really contribute above and beyond in a massive way for the state. And anyone who doesn't know what Jack Mundy did, he's the one that introduced green vans in the Rocks, for example. And without him, the Rocks would be a series of high rises. But thanks to him, it's the beautiful, charming
incredible
area that was there from, with all the sandstone from hundreds of years ago.
He's a very famous Greens activist.
Yeah, exactly, and union activist. So she offered the family a state memorial or a state funeral, and they accepted that. Unfortunately, it was right in the middle of lockdown, so that will be a memorial that will hopefully take place soon. When we're coming out of lockdown, that we're able to properly, acknowledge and honour Jack Mundy in an official capacity on behalf of the state. Now, there are other things we do, like Australia Day, we do that every year. Anzac Day we do every year. Remembrance Day we do that every year. Sometimes we get involved in projections on the Opera House sales, because someone will ask Premier if they think it should be done for a certain reason, or we've been doing them regularly. For example, for Remembrance Day, we put poppies up on Remembrance Day to mark as a sign of respect to veterans. We do Diwali every year as a celebration of the Southeast Asian Festival of Light that happens in October. So there's a whole bunch of different things that we get involved in.
It is quite varied.
Yeah, and the best thing about it. The best thing about it, from a personal perspective, is that I used to work at Campbelltown Council, Wollongong Council, Shell Harbour Council in Colorado, and we had our venues. We had a big parks, and most of our events were in that park, and we have a few different event venues. But working in New South Wales government, most of the events are based in Sydney, but you get to work in, the Art Gallery of New South Wales, the MCA, the Sydney Opera House, on the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
Yep.
We did
on the
an event, on the harbour. We do an event every year called Australia Day Live, which is a national telecast, and we do it in between the Harbour Bridge and the Opera House. And that space is, in many ways, the kind of symbolic heart of Australia. Like, there's nowhere else in the world that has two international icons that are literally a couple of 100 metres apart from each other. So we get to put an event on there. So it's a real honour to work, on that event at that level.
And we're so lucky in Australia and in Sydney particularly to have such an incredible event venues.
Absolutely.
As well, that we can utilise for events.
Yeah.
Some really exciting news, I think it was this week, was Australia and New Zealand being awarded the Women's World Cup in 2023, which is super exciting. Was your department involved in that?
Yeah, we were involved in a small way. We assisted. We were there to assist the FFA bid team in gathering some information about Sydney and New South Wales' ability to fulfil the commitments, because they had to commit on behalf of the country. And we also helped facilitate the official inspection visit. So all the heads of FIFA and the delegates came to visit Sydney, and we helped them get around and go have a look at the different venues. And I think it was in the paper, it was mentioned last week after we won the rights, that it was a beautiful day, like it is today, blue skies, and the next day it was raining. So we got kind of lucky that it was a lovely day in Sydney, and they gave us the cup. And I've been to men's World Cups in South Africa in 2010 and Rio, Brazil in 2014. And those events are just huge, of course. And I think that the Women's World Cup has the potential to be, as big as something like the Commonwealth Games at least. And it will only get bigger. And to be holding it in 2023 is not only really good for the events community, good for Sydney, but really good for women's sport too, which I think was reaching a real crescendo of interest pre-COVID. And COVID put a bit of hold on it, but I think it should hopefully keep rolling on.
Absolutely. forward thinking, as you said, supporting women in sport, and not only that, seeing two countries join together is incredible.
Yeah. It couldn't have come at a better time, really, could it? And, you know, the positivity for sports and events and for tourism and for our connection with New Zealand is amazing at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely agree. So I suppose at some point we have to, you know, talk about the old C word, coronavirus, and the impact on businesses. And so what is your approach when you're executing events with your team at the moment?
Yeah, listen, I just wanted to mention something that you mentioned there and the effect on businesses. Now, we're government, and we are lucky because we've continued on and have a job to come to every day. But, you know, we're really feeling for all the different suppliers we're talking to and the organisers like yourselves and a whole bunch of other people and stakeholders that are involved, because we know that when you organise an event, there are huge numbers of people that rely on that event for business, for employment, visitation, all these roll-on effects. And I guess I just time with everyone else and hoping that, you know, come September seems to be the magic kind of time, spring, that we're in a place where we can really start opening up and get that business model up and running again, and hoping that we're not at the point where a lot of businesses and commercial entities have kind of, you know, tapped out their reserves and start falling over. So I'm with everyone in hoping that can continue. Our team has had a bit of a pause on events that we've been organising, although we have just been organising a regional event in the last couple of weeks, which has been really good. We organised a remote Anzac Day at the memorial, beautiful memorial in Hyde Park South, where it was all on screen, which was an interesting thing to be doing. But for Australia Day, sorry?
Did you have to go on site?
Yes. So luckily the Anzac Memorial in Hyde Park South is nice and big. And that was in real lockdown mode. Like that wasn't like now where things are slightly relaxed. So we only had a certain amount of people on site. There was only a certain number of people participating in the event, but it was all captured on screen, and we got through the really important parts of the event that are symbolic to everyone every year: the governor, the head of the RSL, the last post, the minute silence, etc., to make that happen.
Yeah, I stood out on my street, and
oh, well done.
One of my neighbours had the radio going, which was live broadcast. And it was incredibly moving, and it brought a lot of people together at a time that we couldn't have an event. And
maybe those events that have a real symbolic history to them, like Anzac Day, it's good to see the power of those events can withstand this kind of restrictions on them. So that's kind of a positive sign for that event, even though there were massive negative connotations about gatherings at that particular time. But in terms of our business moving forward, because we're in charge of Australia Day in Sydney, and they're really big events, we have an event, that Australia Day live event has 6,000 people at the Opera House forecourt, 55,000 people around the Circular Quay all at the one time. So we've got a bit of a three-stream approach, and I'm sure everyone else in the events industry is maybe approaching it in a similar way. We're trying to make plans for business as usual, so that there are no restrictions in place. We're making plans in a mid-restricted world, so kind of like where we are now, where we have rules like one person per 4 square metres, limits on numbers within certain areas. And then there's the third stream, which would be going backwards from where we are now, which is we're going into lockdown again, and it all has to be done via screen, which is interesting because, I mean, I don't know how you guys have interpreted it or viewed it, but I've watched a lot of examples of events that are trying to take place online on screen, like we are now. We're talking, so we don't have to be intrinsically more entertaining than just talking. But people that are trying to deliver music events and performances have found it, I think, really challenging without the energy of the crowd to work off. And there's been really good examples of innovative stuff that's kind of worked, like Keith Urban did a great thing on the Lady Gaga kind of a virtual event, but then there's been other performers that haven't quite hit the mark either. So it's been a real learning curve for everyone, I think.
You think that they miss the connection a little bit, mate, because it's online?
Yeah, I think so
Hard to
for
replace.
sure. Like it all feels like I don't think those kind of things didn't really happen before COVID. Like you didn't see, Lady Gaga say, "Hey, I've got a new single. I'm going to perform it for you now, live to you, face to face." She puts a video out, and then you'll see it at a concert. So I don't think it's going to live beyond the COVID world. Or if it does, it's going to be kind of like maybe in a much shorter, sharper way. So maybe artists will be more comfortable dropping little snippets of songs face to face and then waiting until they have the energy of the live performance or the production values of a video to be able to show it to the world.
Yeah, and it's interesting, mate, with that you say it as well. We've talked about it a couple of times in different episodes, but people are dying to get back to events, and we've seen that. We talked about it last episode. We were talking about New Zealand going back to the rugby, but people are really, they're really wanting the connection and the real life experience. So it's interesting you saying that about online. Let's call it online events.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like it's
they definitely have a place, but
yeah, it's been an okay thing, and there's some interesting stuff happening out there. But people are yearning maybe to get back together and feel that kind of combined energy, I think.
Within 4 square meters, just so Hayley can.
Yeah. Well, I know some people have said that they're looking forward to the 4 square meters. I think it was you, Hayley, because you want to be able to dance, and you like to dance, and you like to spread out. So
I'm desperate to get to some live music, but I do like to have my own space. So I feel like this could work well for people.
Yeah.
It's the hybrid.
Look, something I think that our whole industry is trying to get their heads around as much as possible is what are the rules right now? So stadiums, some stadiums were supposed to go back to, I think, 10,000 or 25% of capacity this weekend.
Yeah.
But then, if you actually Google it in New South Wales, what are the restrictions? It's like you can't gather more than 20 people. And do you have any more insights than that? What's your understanding of what the rules are at the moment?
Oh, listen, I think that I'm not really speaking on behalf of government here. I've got to be careful in this space because we're dealing with a situation that's unprecedented. Sure. So you've got authorities working through these scenarios they never expected. Like I think if this happens again in 2 years' time, people kind of know what they're doing. But everyone's trying to figure out what to do and how to set rules for people so that economic activity, social activity can start to take place in a safe way. And we've all seen examples of where things haven't happened in a safe way, and we really want to avoid that. So, the authorities are in a difficult position. Event organisers know that their authorising environment includes police, transport agencies, health, etc. So it's really hard for those agencies to say, "Oh, it's all okay. You go ahead with your event." And the hardest thing is for the authorities and the event organisers is that you can say what the rules are today. You can say what the rules might be like if there's been a announcement that they're about to be eased further or restricted further in 2 weeks' time. But you can't predict what they'll be like in a month's time, in 3 months' time, or in 6 months' time. So that's the really hard part of it, is that you've got to try to be working on these different streams. But for some events, that's so hard to do, and it's just, you really feel for them. Like if you run a large athletic running event, if you're New Year's Eve trying to figure out how to gather crowds. But luckily, living with uncertainty is probably an events person's greatest asset. You're living with the ifs and the buts. You're always living with different versions of the future. And for example, your South Coast event, is it called Meet You in the South Coast? Is that it?
So this one's Meet Me in the South Coast.
Yeah, Meet Me in the South Coast. Now I know that you guys are trying to get that event up in March, April. And then it got moved back to May. And because you're an event person, you had flexibility. You were able to say, okay, if we can get this certain amount of funding happening and partners involved, we can make it happen then. Oh, but then this has happened. And you kept rolling and kept rolling. And now you've got a model where you can achieve it at the end of the year. And I think that the events industry is particularly good at living with that uncertainty, because we're always, it's rare that we have things exactly set 6 months out, that we know how much funding we've got to use. We know exactly which venues and what their rules are going to be.
You don't know if you're going to be sold. You don't know how much fundraising is going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I suppose in history we've got trends, right, that you and I spoke about. So one of our events, we have a standard 20% drop of, you know, and there's things that we can forecast with trending. However, we're in unprecedented times.
Yeah.
So how do we forecast that? And, you know, we're having lots of conversations with different clients at the moment, you know, trying to encourage them to go on sale. But with uncertainty, it's really difficult for some clients to do that, and completely understandable.
Yeah.
But we don't, you know, people are coming to us and saying, are we going to be okay to run an event in 3 months? And we're like, well, we don't know. But go on sale and we can organise it for then, and then we can do it if we need to. And I think hopefully the public will understand that that's just how it is.
So you're comfortable with living in uncertainty. I am too, although comfortable is the wrong word to use with this uncertainty. But what's happening now is that the event public are being trained to live with uncertainty as well. So if someone signs up for an athletic event and it's due to be run in September or October, they're not thinking this event's going ahead 100%. I'm going to start training, it's going to happen. They're thinking, gee, I hope it goes ahead. I'm going to sign up. But then they'll read the fine print. In the fine print, it'll say, this event may not happen. Or, you know, and if not, you'll get your money back, or you won't get your money back, or whatever it is. And they're living with that, because unfortunately, you know, we've all been trained to live with some uncertainty in the last 3 months just by the kind of circumstances that we find ourselves in.
You're right. I think it's because we live in the best case, worst case world in our industry, right? And so we're used to having all of these different sets of scenarios in our minds with everything that we do. So we're kind of trained over, I won't say how many years, but but you know, like we've definitely, and you're going back to, I was actually thinking about it, you were saying, you know, obviously with the uncertainty, but in some ways we're kind of making our own ways, you know, we're making our own, blazing our own paths. And I kind of always come back to the NRL and how they kind of blazed their own way, and well, we're doing this and it's going to be this date, and everyone was like, there's no way that that's happening. But they just blazed there. If you talk about it enough and you put everything in place and all of the fallbacks and this, and we talk and we make sure we got this in place, it just started to happen. And then others have followed, you know. And I think we're in that situation that is so unprecedented that we do have to blaze our own ways and say, okay, we need to be out there. And also we're going to be popping up with every other person who is trying to do an event in a 3 month period instead of a year. And so we need to get in front of those spaces.
Within the guidelines.
Within the guidelines, obviously. Yeah.
Safety doesn't take a holiday.
Doesn't take a holiday. I was just going to say as well, I was just going to touch on where some of just a quick run around the country of where we are at, maybe with some of the states. So with Queensland, they're just about to move to stage 3 as of 3rd of July. And with that, their numbers are they're going to basically go to a 4 square metre a ruling across the nation, and they can be up into 500 persons and up and over 10,000 within COVID safe event plans approved. So their numbers are really starting to move ahead. New South Wales, we're looking at 4 square metres. The stadium's at 25% capacity, so around 10,000 kind of mark. WA's moving to 2 square metres per person, unseated performances, but no multi-stage festivals. Stadiums at 50%. So Optus Stadium would be up over 30,000 people. South Australia also 2 square metres per person. Tassie, 2 square metres per person, but at a maximum of 500 people outdoors. ACT's at 4 squares, but up to only 100 people. And Northern Territory, they've only got 1 active case at this stage, and they're essentially back to how they were operating beforehand. So I won't touch on Victoria, obviously. At the moment. Kind of dodged around that one. Sorry, Victoria. But I guess that is going to be a little bit of uncertainty for us to know with Victoria.
Yeah.
But outside of that, it's a really positive situation to be in. Yeah, as a country.
Yeah, and we're all going through this together. Like the last couple of weeks was a bit of a roller coaster because there was this little sunshine moment about 3 weeks ago, I think it was, which would have been early June, where everything looked like it was getting better. All the states were kind of responding well. The rates were really low. New Zealand had just reopened completely, and it was like, wow, we might all get out of this thing. And then Victoria started, recording double-digit numbers of new cases and have done so consistently. So now we've kind of gone, as a nation, we've kind of gone, oh, okay, let's not be too quick to, pop the champagne corks here. And you look at that curve, you look at the COVID curve, and there is this little second wave starting in the whole country, and we know it's kind of Victoria, and we hope that they get it under control soon. But you've got to temper your innate enthusiasm and optimism with that possibility that, oh no, wouldn't it be, where will we be in 2 months' time? And we just don't know. We just got to try to plan for as many outcomes as possible. And,
exactly. Yeah, and we've sort of touched on how important it'll be for us as event producers to make sure that we're following the guidelines and doing everything absolutely perfectly. Like, the last thing that any of us needs, or anyone in the industry needs, is for there to be a spike off the back of something, So it's really important that once we're going back, we are also making sure that we are doing absolutely everything perfectly correct, and not just going in like cowboys, because it could be something that really gives us a big downturn again.
I was listening to a history podcast about the Spanish flu in Australia in 1919, I think it was, and one of the things that was given as a big negative was that Sydney thought it was coming out of the infection rates and thought everything was getting better, and they had a big ball at the town hall in Sydney, and hundreds and hundreds of people went to this big ball, and I don't know if social distancing was a thing back then, but they didn't social distance, and there ended up being massive amounts of infections coming from that, and that sparked the next wave. And the number of people who died in Australia from the Spanish flu is just massive. So events, yes, you're right, we're particularly susceptible, which is why we got shut down first and why we'll reopen last, because it just is the nature that we want people to gather together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, look, one thing that I think we've been looking at particularly anyway is what the government rules are with respect to. So if you look and it says, the 20 people rule, actually when you look deeper into the guidelines, it's about the 4 square meters, but it needs to be a professional organizer, because you need professionals to make sure that everyone's adhering by the correct rules, just as what he was saying. And I think we can do that, and we can do it within guidelines. And it is professionally run. Our events are going to come back bigger and better than ever. I think we saw something released from Ticketek earlier today, actually, and I think it said 96% of people. They'd done a recent survey, and 96% of people said that they were really looking forward to getting back to events, which is incredible.
Yeah. And we talked about the possibility that people will want to get back together, and they will want to have that rush of being in a large crowd. But there might also be people that never want to do that again, and they can never tell you why. They just, and so it's like who knows what the consequences are going to be. But I think a lot of people are yearning for that kind of contact in the last mass euphoria kind of way.
Absolutely, and it's actually within that same article, Jeff Jones, who we've had on here before as well, touched on that as well, and just saying that what they're seeing, what they're expecting is that people are going to come back to events even stronger than they have in the past, just because of that wanting to have that connection. So it's really positive to hear someone of that standings speaking like that about the industry. Yeah,
and actually, Alistair, so our industry is going to change, and hopefully for the better, and I think it will for the better. Are you seeing anything from the last few months that might benefit our industry moving forward?
Well, I think that the one thing that's been proved to everyone and us is the power of crowds, the power of people. If you'd have said to someone, would you go see a music event if there was no crowd? They might go, oh yeah, sure, I'll do that. If I'm the only one there. But then now we've seen how much energy that the performers get off the crowd and get it back to them. And there's this, it's an ineffable thing. It hasn't been measured. It's this energy that takes place between sporting teams that elevate their performance to another level, musicians who play off the crowd, and the energy of the crowd lifts them as well. All sorts of entertainment products, and also events like Anzac Day, where if you have a large gathering of thousands of people paying their respects all at the same time, all being silent to respect the sacrifices, that means so much more. So I think that that maybe events might have been taken by some people a little bit glibly in the past. They were, desirable but not essential. I think people might realise how important they are for society and for us as human beings to show, what we collectively are excited about and how we want to express that in large groups.
Yeah, I think what you're sort of getting at there with the atmosphere being a major factor in the quality and the connection with people, with events. We're obviously seeing that, as you sort of touched on there, we're seeing that with with players in, say, the NRL, going into a stadium with nobody in the stadium to have to be at a level to play at that level, but not having the same atmosphere and that pushing through to their performance.
And the thing I love about that is that when the NRL did 2 rounds before they went into lockdown, there were no crowds, and it just happened, so they didn't have any crowd noise, and it felt like a training run. You could hear the kick, the ball, and nothing else. Since they've come back, they've put in crowd noise. Now I know it's crowd noise, it's crowd noise. Everyone knows it's fake, but it feeds my soul to hear it. I know I'm being played, but I want to be played because I like to watch the South play every week, and just to hear that makes me feel like it's more important that it's there. And I know it's a trick, but it's I just kind of need it to watch it.
It rounds out the product, right? I like to call it just a product, but it rounds it out, and it's what makes it so entertaining, right? It's what we love about it.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you said before. You said, that feeling, or that, I suppose, that vibe that comes from it is unquantifiable. And I think that's really interesting, because events are experiences and they're moments, and you can't get that from a digital experience, right?
That's right.
People's energy.
Yeah.
But there's parts of events where you do need to be able to quantify it, and I think our whole industry has been trying to quantify what is it that's been missing, and interestingly, it might be that it's unquantifiable. That small section is you can't quantify the value of connection.
And feeling,
and feeling,
and kind of tying a few streams here together. I remember, let's take the digital experience. If you listen to a song like Angels by Robbie Williams that was released in the 90s, and you listen to it on the radio or on a CD, right? I sing along, great song, sing it in the car, maybe with a friend, you're singing along with them. And then that's one thing. You get fulfillment out of that. You really like that. But then when you go to the concert and he's singing it and you're singing along, and there's thousands of people with you singing along, and they've all had that experience in the car, and you all collectively realise that at the same moment without consciously realising it. It's just a real shared kind of experience that you can't get at home on your own. And that's what I think we're all yearning for, to get back and do it like that.
And absolutely, there's place for digital events, there's place for hybrid events, there's place for all different types of events in the world. It's just that live experience, I think, everyone's starting to crave. Going on the quantifiable, part of the Department of Premier and Cabinet, you actually have a behavioural insights department. Can you explain a bit for us about what that is?
Yes, they're a very different part of the department to me, so I'm not an expert on what they do, but I know that they were set up a number of years ago, and I think they were the first behavioural insights team outside of the UK, and that was set up, I think, by Tony Blair in the late noughties over there. And what they do is they try to refashion messaging to people to get them to act differently. So the best example I can give of that is that you might get a parking fine.
I have.
You had one before, recently?
Yes.
I've never had one. Obviously.
So they know that you know, I don't know the figures here. I'm going to make them up. Now let's say 5% of people don't pay their parking fine on time. So that means you've got to follow up with another letter and costs money and blah, blah, blah. So it's better for everyone if everyone pays their parking fines on time, theoretically. So what they do is they look at the wording in the letter that goes out with the parking fine. And instead of saying, you know, the old approach was, you must pay this parking fine. If you do not pay this parking fine, you will get fined further, you know, in red and in bold. What they do is test different strategies where they might go something like, did you know that 9 out of 10 people in your suburb pay their parking fines on time? We'd love you to join them and do that. And you go, oh, okay, well, wait a second. It's a different part of your brain. You're not being threatened by the bad, you know, by the pay up people. You're being drawn towards be a responsible citizen.
Brought into the community.
Yeah, so they try different things, and that's just a tiny example of all the stuff that they do. And they helped us test something which is kind of interesting, where we experience a drop-off rate with free ticketing. So we're state government. We do a lot of, all our events pretty much are free. But then sometimes we have to ticket them to make sure that we only get a certain number of people showing up. And we don't have a venue.
Is there generally a trend?
Sorry?
Is there a trend with how many people drop off?
Yes, the drop-off rate that's around 30%. So you might, if you want 100 people, you have to give away 130 tickets around that to make sure you get those 100 people, because 30 of them are not going to show up. So they helped us come up with strategies of ways in which we could try to decrease that number, because we all want to rely on the number of people coming to an event. And I've tested that 30% with other organisations that do free ticketing, and it's pretty similar. For some reason, people will stay at home and go, oh, you know what, it looks a bit hot today, I won't go to that event because I got the ticket for free, so it doesn't really matter. So they helped us test strategies, you know, texting people 2 days before the event, emailing them 1 day before the event, the language around that, etc. The stuff that we tried didn't actually work, but it was really interesting to try.
Yeah.
To try to increase that with different approaches to the messaging.
Yeah, humans are creatures of habit. We find a lot of trends in events that we do that you can always guarantee there's a certain percentage of different types of people that are going to show, or depending on how much they spend and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's quite fascinating. So sorry, CT, I think I jumped in on you before.
Maybe I'm not sure what I was going to say, so maybe just move on.
All right, well, I think that we're pretty much done. This has been an incredible conversation. Yeah. Thank you so much, Alistair.
Great.
I do have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
What events are you excited about attending when this all goes back to normal?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, live music and sport. I'm keen to go see the Rabbitohs play again. Keen to go to organise and then attend the Jack Mundy State Memorial, which is more of a professional thing. I've also got my eye on the Red Hot Summer Tour, which they're selling tickets to in October in Kiama. Yeah, but again, I'm like everyone else. I'm like, do I buy a ticket now? And if the event doesn't happen, will I get a refund, or do I wait? Or so I just want to get summer's evening, sun's going down, baby animals on stage, or you know, some group, and everyone's having a great time and singing along.
You're giving me goosebumps.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to the Meet Me in the South Coast. I think it's going to be a
shameless.
Yeah, well, I'll come along. Tell me what's that about? You can
you can ride, you can swim, you can cycle, you can paddle, you can ride your Harley.
Ride your Harley.
All meet at the festival in Mollymook.
So essentially, it's an event designed to boost economic growth down in the South Coast after the bushfires, and obviously they're going to be hit twice as hard because of COVID-19. So the event is, you start in 4 different places you can choose, and it's around the region of Shoalhaven. So we'll have a Harley Davidson ride coming from Kangaroo Valley. We've got a bike ride going from Lake Conjola, a swim or paddle going from Mollymook Beach, and a run, walk, whatever you want to do, going from Ulladulla. And they meet in the middle.
Make your journey there.
There's local markets, so all local produce and products. All of the local businesses get to display for free. And then we'll have some live music and just generally a good time.
And you'll be dancing in your 4 square metres?
I will be, yes. I will be dancing in 4 square metres.
Well, my parents live down in Ulladulla, so I'll make a point to be there and to celebrate and to go out to the restaurants and try and stimulate that beautiful part of the South Coast. Love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so very much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Hayley. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, mate.
All right. Bye. All right. Well, that's the end of episode 8. Thank you so much, Alistair. Thank you so much, CT. What a great conversation around events and the marketing world. Please feel free to join us on Facebook, the Shift PanelCast. Invite all of your colleagues, invite your friends. Please pay it forward too. We know that these conversations are a really important part of our industry, and we want to build a big community that can support each other over the next few years, months, and weeks. Thank you so much. Bye.